Brenda Pundt, Gayle Wright, Denise Robison. 1 as city controller, 2 on city council, both on to state government in Pennsylvania in different capacities. Dr. Judith Lynch teaches us about these 3 history-making women in her latest installment of her series, the 8th, on Erie County elected women. Hello and welcome to the Jefferson Educational Society's digital programming. I'm Ben Speggen and I'm the Vice President at the Jefferson and am a contributing editor at the Erie Reader. For those looking to read the latest installment out today, Wednesday, December 2nd, or to catch up on or get refreshed with the past 7 installments from this series, please do visit our website, jeserie.org. There you'll find videos to stream on demand where Dr. Lynch and I discuss each one of her reports. And of course, if you're joining us just for the first time you're tuning into this, rest assured you will not be lost if you haven't gotten to those writings or videos just yet. So stick around with us here. We'll cover some of that ground, we'll catch you up to speed, and you'll enjoy today's conversation. Back again to talk politics and history is JES Scholar in Residence, Dr. Judith Lynch, who's been writing about the history of Erie County's elected women and the women's movement as we celebrate the centennial marking of the passing of the 19th Amendment. Her writings and those videos all available, free to download, jeserie.org. A bit about Dr. Lynch before we get started. She started her time at the JES as the first chair of the think tank's Board of Trustees, and she remains on that board today. She served as the inaugural director of the Jefferson Civic Leadership Academy in 2015 and was named the Jefferson Scholar in 2018. Amongst her many accomplishments, she spent time in academia, serving as a professor of political science and history at Mercyhurst University, and prior taught at Allegheny College, where she was a part of the Civic Engagement Institute there as well. She was a 5-term county executive in Erie, but before that, the first woman elected to Erie County's new county council, and was instrumental in drafting the Erie County Home Rule Charter. She's also worked as an analyst for the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, and taught 13 years at Villa Marie High School. She received her doctorate distinction in political science in 2001 from the University of Pittsburgh and her master's in social studies from Gannon University. Her undergraduate degree, a bachelor's in history and political science, is from George Washington University. Now, folks, since this program is first airing live on the JES Facebook page, we'll work our way through as many questions from you, the viewers, as we can as we host this event. If you have a question, just leave it in the comments section below. If you're watching or listening to a later broadcast of this event, still send us your questions, your comments. Keep the dialogue going. Dr. Lynch and I will review those. We value your contributions and part of this conversation, this program. And of course, for more information about upcoming Jefferson Educational Society programs and publications, please visit jeserie.org and find us on your favorite social platform. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Dr. Judith Lynch, thanks for joining me for part 8 of this wonderful series.
Wow, very pleased to be here, Ben.
So, Dr. Lynch, I've started all of them just thanking you again because I know what you're doing is helping us better learn our history in full. We're telling our history in full. We're studying it in full. And I know that sometimes that can be challenging to get access to the primary and secondary sources that you need, especially in a time of COVID when many of us are social distancing or restrictions are being put in place. So just a heads up here, and we'll remind people at the end, we may be on a slight pause with this series come next week. We know that some of the restrictions include limiting access to public buildings and institutions where some of this research is available. But Dr. Lynch, we appreciate you moving forward and continuing to do this as you can, as you provide this tremendous asset to the community. So we're grateful for that. And folks, we'll keep you up to date on our website and those social platforms and via email when to expect new installments as Dr. Lynch can continue to do her work. So Judy, thank you, and thank you all for tuning in.
Oh, it's my great pleasure.
So in the past installments, Dr. Lynch, we have covered quite a few times the year 1989, an historic year, a big year. And here we find ourselves back in this installment, back in 1989, again, as you begin your next look at Erie County elected women, this time focusing on the City of Erie controller race. For those reaching for a civics textbook to look up controller, to figure out what exactly they do, remind themselves the role and responsibilities and duties of a controller. Can you save us the trip to the bookcase and remind us what a controller does?
Well, a controller is a very, very significant position because the controller is really the citizen's guardian of the financial doings or apparatus of the level of government. And in this case, it's the city of Erie. So it's an extraordinarily important position.
And here in 1989, you're introducing us to Brenda Pundt, who you note took a road to political office that so many others had, a connection to the school district. Remind us of some of the others and the significance that a connection to the school district plays, and how this helped really pave Brenda's path toward political office.
Well, Brenda had also a very important private sector career. But what was important to her politically was the fact that she was the school director for the city of Erie. And that meant that every 4 years, her name was on the ballot, and people, of course, in Erie became very well attuned to her name and to her credentials and to her dedication. And so when it came to her running for controller of the city of Erie, this probably helped her, assisted her more than any other aspect.
And we've seen that before with the likes of Joyce Savacchio, who was first on city council and then the first woman to become mayor, the only woman to become mayor of the city of Erie at this point. We've also seen that with Lou Tullio, a storied career in the school district, and we've seen that with you too, before you were elected to county council and then county executive, the role that, as you've put out, your cheerleaders at Villa Maria High School have played. So we know that that's important. But let's take a look at Brenda Pundt's work as controller. You write that as a controller, Pundt was diligent in her review of accounts of the city and its property. An example that you offered is her attentiveness to confiscated firearms. Tell us about that example.
All right. As we all know, one of the duties of the police for the city of Erie is that they intercede. And if in fact there are people that they stop, and investigate, and they find that they have an unlicensed firearm, or they're in the possession of a firearm for any reason that they should not have, then they confiscate that firearm. And then, of course, the city holds those. Then the question is what in fact happens to these firearms? And
yeah, I think that's one of the things we don't think of is once they're confiscated, where do they go? So yes. Brenda takes a look into this.
Yes, there is a storeroom, there is a storage area, and it was absolutely her intent to ensure that every single confiscated firearm was there in that storage area and had been identified, and people could know that exactly what its origin was. And so rather than have a minion or somebody in her employee, somebody else count the firearms or rely on what she was told, she insisted that she be given access to the storage area, and she counted every single one of those firearms.
So we started talking about 1989, the year of the women. And we had mentioned that before. That was an Erie Daily Times headline that they had declared. And in a past installment, we talked about how Joyce Savacchio leaves city council and is elected as mayor. So we have the Savacchio administration. In this installment, when you're taking a look at Brenda Pundt, you write, at times, her aggressive pursuance of anything that looked askew would bring opposition from the Savacchio administration. You cite one of the examples there that I want to ask you about. You talk about how she hired a private investigator to investigate a high-ranking city official. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, this would be a little bit aggressive, probably tended to kind of scrape some egos in the city administration. And Brenda Pundt did not indicate to either Joyce Savacchio or any member of city council her intention to investigate this person. Now, exactly who this person was, I have no idea. But the investigation itself turned into quite a scrape between Mayor Savacchio and city council and Brenda Pundt. And Brenda eventually recognizes that perhaps she was overzealous, because this person was already apparently slotted to be dismissed from city administration. and that Brenda Pundt had gone beyond perhaps, and I don't really think this is true, but perhaps her official capabilities in utilizing city money to hire an investigator to do this investigation.
And I think that's what a lot of people might first think of. Citizens are always cautious and conscious of where taxpayer dollars are being spent. And so to use taxpayer dollars for that, I'm sure that's something people are going to perhaps perk up a little bit when they're reading that. Some of the words you use, I think, are great in this write-up. When you're talking about Brenda's attentiveness to her work, you talk about how she's diligent. I just said aggressive pursuance is one of the words. Another one you have is scrupulous. And you say that she was scrupulous about seeing that the city adhered to the third-class city code. And again, before we're headed to that bookcase to pick up that civics textbook, remind us the difference between class codes when it comes to cities, because certainly third-class city code doesn't mean Erie, Pennsylvania is third rate, right?
No, certainly not. However, it's ranked in that category because of its population. And the ranking, of course, is done by the state of Pennsylvania. Now, local governments are also agents of the state. They are not independent. They are not able to do as they please. They must adhere to state requirements, and these state requirements are put into a code. And code meaning a compilation of restrictions and requirements. And since it was the city of Erie's population placed it in the category of being a third-class city in terms of population, it then had to adhere to the third-class city code. And she, of course, knew all of those details, and she made sure that the people who were in administration understood the requirements of the state of Pennsylvania, and she carried them out. She made sure that those were adhered to.
And speaking of the state, she catches the eye of a lot of other controllers throughout the state of Pennsylvania. Actually, in 1993, you tell us that her work is recognized statewide. Tell us about her winning the respect of her fellow controllers throughout the state of Pennsylvania.
Well, she does that in two different ways. First, she is elected president. She is elected president of the Pennsylvania Controllers Association. Now, that's a tremendous honor because her fellow controllers, who are all dealing with the same situations and problems, have a respect enough for her authority, her integrity, in order to say, yep, she's the person we want to have as president of our state association. And then, of course, one of the other accolades she is given is she is named Controller of the Year. And I believe that comes in 1995.
And what an award to win, what recognition to win. Tucked away up here in northwestern Pennsylvania, we have a Controller of the Year, and it's Brenda Pundt. You talk about 1989 a few different times in other installments, and one of the things I want to recap here for folks who might need that refresher or are joining us just for the first time. An important thing that happens in '89 is we see the imposing of term limits in city government. We had not had those before, and so she is reelected under the term limits, but for her third four-year term that she is elected for, she wins handedly. Tell us about the significance of this, as she's elected not just once again. We're not just elected once, not just reelected once, but reelected twice. She serves the full term and wins handedly in that third election. What's the significance here, Dr. Lynch?
Yes, she does. She wins handedly. She has no opposition in the Democratic primary. And this is, of course, because the city of Erie is highly Democratic. The primary is the essential election, not the general election, but the primary. She has no opposition. She's on the ballot as the controller for voters to vote for. And then she does have opposition in the general election, but the person that is opposing her is a relative unknown. In fact, when I read his name, it did not recall his personage to me at all. And I believe it was Jerry Quirk. And at any rate, she wins that election handedly with very little opposition. Of course, none from the Democrats and very little from the Republicans.
And so we see her finish out her career as a controller, term limited career as a controller, very strong. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, 1989. So here we are back in 1989, and we see Joyce Savacchio, we already mentioned that, be elected from city council. She's on council serving her second term. She runs for mayor, wins, becoming the first woman, only woman to date to be elected as mayor for the city of Erie. But as she's leaving council, her seat must be filled. And so this brings us to the second woman in your newest installment that you introduce us to or refresh us on and teach us about, Gayle Wright. Tell us about Gayle Wright. Let's get started there.
Well, this also happens in 1989 in the election. There are 2 seats to fill, and both of those seats are filled by women. One is Gayle Wright. And of course, Gayle is well known. She has a prominent position in a sense. She has worked for Erie Insurance Exchange. She has worked in the city school district. She was a teacher. She graduated from Gannon, and she has that type of background. And so she runs for the position of city council and is elected.
And one of the things that we see that is remarkable is that she wins and is in 1989. She gets the 3rd highest amount of vote totals. She's got the name recognition, and she does well. But when she seeks re-election for her second term, she tops the ballot and gets the highest turnout. What does that tell us, Dr. Lynch?
I think that tells us a lot about her disposition and capability of getting along with everybody. People who would be men or women serving on city council, others in the political realm. And she is able to kind of be everybody's person. She is thought highly of. She's intelligent. She works hard. She is dutiful. And yet she is also that understands the people, the relationships that she has to form with those that she is working with. So in my opinion, could have easily been, no, I shouldn't say easily, but she could have been elected as a second woman. If she had chosen to run after Joyce had finished her mayor position as mayor, I think Gayle could have been elected, but there was another road that she took.
And we're going to get to that other road in just one second. But before we get there, while she's still on council, one of the things you tell us about is that she pushes an agenda for a metro government. What is it? Why does it matter?
Well, she does that even as she's running for city council. And it is an issue at that time, metro government. And what it would mean is that you would have these suburban areas such as Summit or Harbor Creek and Mill Creek, they would become part of the city of Erie. Now, there's an awful lot that would have to happen in order to have that occur. But what her intent was to build a better foundation for the city. The city at this time is losing population, and its tax base is being depressed by a number of different things, not only the loss of population, but also the fact that property is deteriorating and that jobs are being lost. This is the of course, the end of the 1980s. And so they're looking for a way in which to buttress, to grow, to kind of build a support system for the city of Erie.
And I feel like that can be an episode in and of itself of you and I talk metro government and regional approach when it comes to government, how it's somehow worked and not worked, and unpack that. We don't have enough time for that today. But one of the things I do want to come back to, and I think this speaks to Gayle Wright's achievements, is that she actually becomes the second woman. Joyce Savacchio was the first. She becomes the second woman to serve as council president. What does
Yes.
this tell us about Gayle Wright?
Well, I think again, it's what we have already said, that she works well with others, that she's amiable, she's highly respected. She's somebody, and in fact, Joe Borgia, who was serving on city council, I believe said, and it's quoted in one of those articles, that of all of the persons that he has served with, the one he would think that would be the best as mayor, the one council member the best as mayor would be Gayle Wright.
And I think that says a lot. And we talked about that could have been a path. She could have been the second
Yes.
woman, with Joyce being the first and the only. But she takes a different road, and we see that happen in 2001. There's a special election for state rep. She runs, she wins. That's the path. Tell us about that, Dr. Lynch.
Well, it's a sadness too, because as we know, one of the foremost politicians or political persons of this era was Italo Capobianco, and he dies in 2001. And so that leaves his position in the state. He was a representative from the city of Erie's second legislative district. That leaves that vacant. And so the state requires a special election to fill that seat. And Gayle Wright decides to become a candidate in that special election.
And that experience, so she wins, she goes on, and she faces a somewhat crowded field. It's not guaranteed she's going to win.
No.
But unfortunately, it's short-lived for her, for that experience.
Yes, it is. And one of the things that we all recognize is that there continues to be an ethnic kind of identification or characteristic of certain areas of the city. The second legislative district was highly Italian. And so the person, after she wins her special election, then there is the regular election. And in that, she is confronted in the primary by Florindo Fabrizio, and he wins the primary.
And we've talked about the significance of primary elections in Erie, particularly when they're either in districts or wards that are heavily dominated by one political party. It tends to be Democrats in Erie when we're looking at that. This happened to be, again, the ethnocentric political movement in Erie, a concentration of an Italian population, an Italian-American population in that area. But earlier you teased, Dr. Lynch, that there were two seats up in 1989 for city council. And I want to bring us back to a political party because we see something happening that hadn't historically happened in a while. So Gayle Wright was one of the seats, one of the people to fill one of the seats for city council. The other is Denise Robison, and she is a Republican. And so not since the mid-1960s had a Republican been elected to city council until Denise. It's important to note that historic moment, though. Two women, two seats, two women are serving on council the first time. Tell us about that watershed moment for Erie, Pennsylvania.
Well, Denise Robison was the first Republican to be elected to city council since Quentin Orlando had been elected during the 1960s. And he served for many years on city council. Highly thought of, okay? So Denise now is a second Republican, and she takes her seat in this very, very different 1989, the seat, of course, or the council operations of that election actually started in 1990. So she is seated in 1990 as one of the two women in city council.
And one of the things that I just continually appreciate with these installments, and remind folks they're available to download to read and enjoy, jeserie.org. You'll also find all the past discussions that Dr. Lynch and I have had about these reports. One of the things that I've mentioned before that I really appreciate you doing, Dr. Lynch, is including the newspaper clippings or some of the political ads that we see at the time. And one that you include for Denise Robison is that here you talk about an editorial description of her candidacy, and it features a list of outstanding credentials. Tell us about the credentials and how they helped pave the way for her to political office.
Well, one of the things that she features on is the importance of the location of the city of Erie. And she says water is gold. Water is gold. Now she is referring also to the water department. And at this time, the city, including the mayor, Joyce Savacchio, intends to sell the water department to the authority in order to garner enough money or revenue to support the city's operations. And so she's very much in favor of that. But Denise is also working with Joyce Savacchio and working with many others in the development of the Bayfront. And she sees the development of the tourist industry in the Bayfront as something that's essential for the growth of Erie. She is on the Port Authority. She already is on the Port Authority. She's on almost all of the organizations that have really jurisdiction and clout in the construction or the renovation of the Bayfront. And she's right there, Johnny on the spot, pushing for this to occur.
And it's so interesting to see history come back around again, because today in Erie, Pennsylvania, we're looking at the relationship between the city and the water authority. And we're also continuing to look on Bayfront development and what it means to be a post-industrial Bayfront and a post-industrial city, and how our development is connected to that, how we can connect the downtown better to our Bayfront to make those connections. So it's so fascinating to see those conversations in the late 80s, early 90s, and to see that we're still having those today. She won the endorsement of critical labor unions, even though she was a Republican. You write in this installment. Tell us about that, because it seems as if, despite the odds being against her, near 3-1 Democratic voter registration edge, she wins. She's a Republican, and you see those critical labor unions backing her.
Mm-hmm. One of them is the Paper Workers Union, and you may be reminded of Hammermill. And of course, seated at Hammermill was Paper Workers Union, and it was one of the strongest unions, as well as GE's UE 506. And she won the endorsement of both unions. And for a Republican to win that type of an endorsement, it was really very consequential. So I think it tells you something about the support that she had in the city of Erie.
And you've got a great quote. And again, I feel like, at least today, I feel it, that we are, fractured along party lines, and it seems one party versus the other. And maybe that's just the tension that we felt in 2020. But you have such an outstanding quote that you feature from Denise Robison here that says, "We don't have Republican or Democratic problems. We have people problems and money problems. We all made promises, very specific ones, during the campaigning, and I intend to be held to them. A new era," I really love this part, "a new era of city government for the city of Erie begins tonight. It's Erie's finest hour." What a quote.
I think it is too, because what it does is it brings the city of Erie together collectively, Democrats and Republicans, but others, and asking them to be part of the group that pushes forward. This is our finest hour. This is the time in which we rebuild, and we have a future that we can all be proud of.
And with her in the future, we see her, like others, reelected. So she is reelected, and we see that happen in the election of 1993. And she goes onward and upward. But before we get to where she heads, because she only serves one full term before she heads off to a different position, you interestingly note, again, an odd mirroring in 2020 to our past history. There was a ballot issue in that election. Tell us about the ballot issue of 1993.
Well, this is election night, 1993. And of course, in the courthouse, what they are doing is counting ballots. And all of a sudden, they discovered that there are ballots missing. And so that creates quite a commotion. And eventually what they do is they find that they were misplaced, and they do find the ballots. This is a master ballot. It was of Summit Township. So the master ballot would have contained all the ballots of that particular area of Summit Township. It was considerable. And so it was found, and it was, of course, a misplacement of the document. It wasn't an error in counting, but still it was corrected.
And it was corrected, and it didn't seem like there was nefarious activity going on, and we got through that election. And so
Right.
we see Denise Robison 2 years in to her second term, and we actually see another election, one that she isn't directly part of, impacting her political life. Tell us about that election.
Well, of course, this is one of the most important elections from the history of the city of Erie, or Erie County, the whole community. And that is the election of Tom Ridge as governor, and that came in 1995. She and her husband and others who associated with her were strong supporters of the Tom Ridge for governor. And when he accomplished that goal, what he did is he turned around and he appointed her the assistant director of the Department of Aging. Now, there was a fellow that named Brody that was also from Erie, and Denise had worked with him. He became the department head or secretary for the Department of Aging. And of course, he and Denise formed a team and a partnership, and they pushed the Department of Aging into activities that helped and assisted the part of our population that was growing the fastest, and that was the elderly.
And despite the fact that we see and we celebrate the accomplishments of Denise Robison to head off to state government and to follow Tom Ridge to Harrisburg, then elected governor, and we see Gayle Wright choose the path of a state representative. And also, one of the interesting things is that then leaves a vacuum of elected women on city council, does it not?
Yes, it does. And in fact, we can turn around and take a look at city council after that and see all men. And James Casey was the one that replaced Denise Robison as she left for Harrisburg. He came and was admitted to her seat on city council. And so there were no more women left on city council.
So in future installments, we're going to take a break there because we see a break in our history. I do think it's important to acknowledge, I just want to, in full disclosure, let folks know that we talked about Joyce Savacchio as a mayor, as well as a city council council person, and we've talked about Denise Robison. Both of those folks we are so honored to have as Board of Trustees members for the Jefferson Educational Society. So in full disclosure, we have a relationship with them on our board, and we were fortunate to have them. Dr. Lynch, we're fortunate to have you. You were still on our board as well, and you're doing some tremendous research. Normally, this is the part of the conversation where I say we're about out of time. Can you give us a sneak peek of who we might encounter in the next installation? I mentioned at the start of this program, we may be interrupted because of some of the social distancing restrictions put in place due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're going to put folks on alert using our social platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, our website, jeserie.org. And of course, we'll be sending out email updates. But Dr. Lynch, if we can, who do you anticipate, if you can give us just the slightest peek around the corner, what's next in this series?
Well, first, and before I do that, I want to thank the Erie County Library staff, Debbie Lyon in particular, but also Courtney Barron, and of course, Andrew Miller and Blaine Dessy. And they are the ones that have been helping me with information. And they email it to me, and it's just been wonderful to do that. But the library is closed, and whether we can keep up this pace and get the information, all of the information that we need for the next installment by next week, I'm not so sure. But if we do that, we are going to turn to the County of Erie. We've been talking about the City of Erie. Now we would look at the County of Erie, and Joy Greco is elected to County Council. In addition to that, we know that Barbara Mack, who had been on County Council, is now elected as controller of the County of Erie. And I believe she is the first female controller of the County of Erie. And then Tracy Seifert is elected to the State House of Representatives. And taking her place on County Council is Carol Lowell. Now, one of the things we have not done is talked about Linda Bebko Jones, who kind of because Linda Bebco Jones is the first woman to serve from this area as a representative of the in the House of Representatives of the state of Pennsylvania. She just, it was a critical election. Anybody who remembers her, we remember her effervescence. She's just a tremendous campaigner. And so I'm not sure exactly how to mesh all of these together, but these are the women that we would be looking at next.
And I'm excited to look forward to that. And Dr. Lynch, I've said this has been a great learning opportunity for me. I know it has been for our audience as well. And of course, I want to echo that. Big thanks to the Erie County Public Library for all of their help and assistance, helping you, the amazing team down there under the leadership of Blaine Dessy. We've been a proud partner with them on a few different things, including when we were having our Jefferson satellite programming. We were doing that out at the Lincoln Community Center in Fairview. So always delighted that we can work with them and their team. So grateful for their support. I think you're supporting them today. I think you've got a Erie County Library sweatshirt on, if I saw it correctly. You've got that little logo there.
I'm going to stand up, and this is Friends of the Public Library. You can purchase this if it's open at the bookshop at the Blasco Library.
Yeah, and we want to encourage all of our folks to, of course, support the library as you can. And be sure to check them out. You can, in fact, find them at, I believe it's just erielibrary.org, but I'll make sure I put the right one down there in the comment section for us. But I think it's erielibrary.org. Always grateful for their support and their help for this project. So, folks, stay tuned. We hope to be back next Wednesday. If we have to take a little pause, we'll find something else to do, we promise. But thank you all so very much for tuning in today, for watching and reading. But Dr. Judith Lynch, a big thanks to you for sharing your knowledge, your expertise, your firsthand experience, and taking the time, energy, and effort to share them all with us here in conversation. Thank you.
My great pleasure, Ben.
And again, thanks to all of you for watching along at home, whether you're tuning in real time or you're watching or listening to a later broadcast of this. We are grateful for you. To read Dr. Lynch's series on elected women that we discussed here today, head over to the Jefferson's website, jeserie.org. There you're going to find her reports, all past, now 8 of them, 8 installments. You'll also find discussions we've had on each one of those. Plus, you'll find other writings from her and other folks that have been contributing throughout our time in digital arena here for the Jefferson. You're going to find more than 100 programs archived on our website, all for free, available to stream and download at your leisure. You can also find out more information about upcoming Jefferson Educational Society programming, as well as other exciting things happening at your community think tank. And be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For the Jefferson Educational Society, I'm Ben Speggen. Be safe, be sound, and thanks for listening and learning with us.